Oh, hello there. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, good everything, wherever you are joining in this conversation. Yes, this is the World Cafe live show, and I'm your host, Amakri Isoboye. How are you doing at your end? Oh, on the globe today. Wonderful. Yes, we're back again. Each time I come into this atmosphere to share with you is so exciting because it's like I know you're there listening, and we're going to, at the end of the day, have something fantastic to take away from the show. I have something juicy that we want to talk about today. Yes, the world of HR, human resources management. And I'm glad to have this wonderful personality with me. Yes, you want to see him. Yeah, I'm going to say one or two things about him, then I'll bring him in. His name is Lars Schmidt. Yes, that's the name and face behind that book you've been, hearing about, Redefining HR. He's an HRO enthusiast, expert. Don't worry, he will introduce himself when he comes on. We have a lot to talk about. Now, I know you want to see him. Let me bring him. Yeah, there you are, Lars. How are you doing?
Yeah, Maki, I'm doing great. Thanks so much for having me on. Been looking forward to this.
Wonderful. Welcome on the show. So, for the benefit of my audience, where are you joining in from now?
Yes, I'm based in Northern Virginia, outside of Washington, D.C., in the United States.
All right. What's the weather like today?
Cold, but sunny and clear. Nice, cool, crisp winter day.
Awesome. Awesome. All right, then. Like I said, I always say this on the show when I have my guests. Nobody knows you like you do. So, in as much as I want to do the introductions and what have you, I allow my guests to introduce themselves. So, who is Lars Smith? Let's get to meet you.
Who is Laura Schmidt? I'm a dad. I'm a husband. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a writer. I'm a podcaster. Really, and kind of at my core, I'm an advocate for modern HR and people practices. So I run a business called Amplify that does
Mm.
HR executive search and has an accelerator program to kind of connect and develop the next generation of chief people officers.
Mhm.
And it has a media component as well. So I host a podcast called Redefining HR, wrote a book also called Redefining HR. I have a column for Fast Company where I cover kind of modern and future of work practices. So, yeah, very diversified, professional world, but I have a lot of fun doing it.
Uh, so why in all of this, everything you have said, so much in one basket, so to say, why is HRO striking that chord for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think that HR is such a unique field and discipline because our ability to impact people at scale is very real. Like if we're doing our roles well, we're creating great programs for organizations, the ability for us to have an impact on every single employee of that company is very tangible. And so, to me, I think it's a very when done right, it's a very noble pursuit that can have a lot of impact. And I know for me personally, I came up from the practitioner side before I started my own company. I ran global recruiting and talent teams at Ticketmaster and NPR and a few other companies. And so I used to be in house, and that feeling of satisfaction when you're able to kind of make a positive impact on the employee's life, whether through recruiting or HR programs, was something that was very real to me.
Beautiful. So how long have you been doing this? For how long now?
Yeah, so probably about 22 years now. I
Whoa,
graduated from college. Yeah, it's been a while. Graduated from college in '98. Started my career then.
wonderful. Now, 2020 brought a whole new, what I say, ball game to how we work and how we see work, how we perceive work, and all that. So, what was it for you? Because I know you wrote your book sometime, I think in 2021, if I'm not mistaken, Redefining HR. So, what was it like for you
Yeah,
grappling
I
with
mean, I wrote most of it in 2020, and it was published in January of 2021. And it was interesting because when I signed the book deal to write Reading Finding HR, I had an idea of the book that I wanted to write. But the backdrop to that book was pre-pandemic, and so then COVID hits, And it's not just COVID. It was COVID. It was the digitization of work. It was the prevalence of remote work. It was having, different conversations around racial justice and equity in society and in our workforces. And so all of those things were happening in 2020. And in some ways, the timing of the book overlapped on those things was kind of fortunate because I could write the book in that context, in that changing context of the new world of work as it relates to all of those things. And so when the book came out in January of 21, I think one of the reasons it did so well is it was one of the first books written about HR, factoring in times of COVID and beyond. And so, it was interesting. And interestingly enough, it didn't substantively change the structure of the book, but it allowed me to bring in elements of this kind of new reality into each chapter of the book.
Wonderful. Before last year, when I contacted you for us to can we do something in this direction and all that. So I got reading and researching about work a century ago. What was it like? What was work like and all that, from the subsistence to slavery, blah, 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 and all that. But the 2020 pandemic more or less hit a reset button for us. It's like we're going back to what work was like a century ago. What do I mean? As in going back home, operating from home, like what we call what's that word now? Remote working. But now more or less we are leveraging on technology. So when I saw your book and went through it, the SAPs and all that, redefining HR, more or less, if you're redefining HR, then it means you're redefining the way we work.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, look, I think one of the most exciting things, as we said, I've been working in the space for over 20 years. This is a once in a generation moment for the field of HR. We actually have an opportunity to not just rewrite how we practice HR, but rewrite work itself. And that's happening at a global level, at a societal level. And part of it is how we work, and that is, remote work and hybrid and constructs. But part of it is also, I think, a lot of just humans, because of living through this once in a generation pandemic. It's caused a lot of us to maybe question some of our priorities in life. And so I think we're making different decisions about work based on those, kind of introspective moments that we've faced. And so there's that, also happening, this kind of great awakening of people realizing that, life is short and maybe work isn't the most important thing in your world, and prioritizing family in different ways. And so all of these things are happening simultaneously. It makes it so exciting.
My question.
Nope. Sorry, Mark. I think I was losing you just a little bit.
Hello? What's happening now?
Yeah.
And
I think I've got you now.
All the changes around us, from your perspective, what does it mean?
I'm sorry. Could you just you just broke up right at the end of that question? I'm sorry.
Did you get my question?
Yeah. Would you repeat the question?
All right. So I said, with what is going on now, I guess.
Yeah, I think our the internet is not being kind to us today, because the repeat of the question was also
Hello,
breaking
Lars?
up, so I'm afraid I couldn't hear you.
If you can hear, I think we're having a time lapse or something.
Yeah, I think we're getting a little bit glitchy. It looks like your signal is coming through, but your signal seemed like it was kind of breaking
Raj, can you hear me now?
in and out. So the audio was a bit too chopped up for me to catch.
Yeah.
Okay, I think
Yeah.
I may have you now. Knock on wood. Do you wanna maybe
Yeah.
try the question one more time?
Didn't work as in,
Yeah, Mockery. I'm sorry. This is for some reason the audio is coming through. Your picture is frozen and the audio is I'm getting like a fragment of every fifth word. It sounds like.
hello,
Okay, I got a little bit of that.
can you hear me?
I just heard that. That was the first thing I've heard in the full sentence in a little while. So can you want to try that again?
I said, given what is going on globally, I see work going forward. How do you see us embracing work going forward?
So I caught the how do we see us embracing work
Did you get
moving forward?
the
Yeah, so I can answer that.
question?
Oh, so the question is how do I see us embracing work moving forward? Yeah, I think I may have lost you again. So I'm gonna take a stab at answering that question and then we'll see if we can jump back in. I think that for there's a range of categories of workers. And so I think first we have to admit that with all the conversation around remote and hybrid work, that's maybe 40% of employees in the workforce are able to do those kinds of roles, right? The rest are roles that require you to be physically in a place. So we'll set aside those jobs for a minute and focus on that 40% of the global workforce. For that percentage, I think that at least for the time being, and probably for the next couple of years, hybrid is going to be the default work model. Most people, very few of that 40% of the global workforce will go into an office 5 days a week. Very few will also go to the office 0 days a week. The majority will probably go in a couple of days, work from home a couple of days. And I think most organizations and businesses are reorienting their operating systems around that hybrid structure, with the assumption that employees will spend a few days in the office and then work the other days from home. And then the offices themselves are actually evolving, where there's a really interesting Wall Street Journal article last week that kind of posited the role of an office in this new world of work is more of a clubhouse than an office. It's a place where employees come
Yeah.
together, more of a collaboration zone, connection zone. It's where you can kind of meet in person to help build culture, but the day-to-day work doesn't necessarily happen there. It's more of a way to bring people together to make those in-person connections. And so I think that's what we're going to see more of from offices, and I think that's probably going to be, at least for the next several years, what our future is going to look like.
All right. Now, from your explanation, for what you're saying now, it's more prevalent in the West, like in the US, in Europe, Iceland, and what have you.
Mhm.
For Africa, how do you see Africa jumping in, or should I say, leapfrogging into this aspect? Because to a large degree, a good number of us here in Africa, Nigeria, and what have you is still like trying to grapple with the reality. How do you see that?
Yeah, look, I think it's one of those things that is going to phase out over time, and it's not going to be globally universal, in approach. And there's a lot of reasons for that. So some may be technology, some may be commuting capabilities. Others might be the types of roles in different regions that might lend themselves to being able to work from home or not. And so I think that while there will be commonalities in regions and there'll be commonalities in regions of Nigeria, I think will mirror what we're seeing in Europe and the U.S. And other regions may not. And so I think it's going to really depend
Yeah.
on a variety of kind of factors of what the working environment looks like in that location. And that statement is probably geographically agnostic, right? If it's a metropolitan area that has a lot of quote unquote office workers, that could be anywhere in the world. And I think these new norms will still apply to that.
Mm-hmm. All right. So, and I use Nigeria because that's where I am.
Mhm.
We have this fundamental challenge with our internet services. Just like we've been having it now, it's glitching and off and on and all that. But I know in the West, pretty you have the internet services. They're pretty much what I say stable. Now, just thinking out of the box because most businesses interface via the internet, via technology that is available. I mean, do you see this, what I call it, support system coming from the West to like help put up that internet structure or technology so that the flow that we expect would be seamless? Do you see that happening in the light
I
of all the
do. And you have
changes around us?
companies like, SpaceX and others who are kind of deploying satellites in different parts of the world to try to increase their bandwidth. Because, as you mentioned, in this kind of information economy that we're in, um, internet, stable internet, reliable internet, fast internet is essential for if we have a work from anywhere, kind of globalization trend that we're seeing more of, for that to
Mhm,
work, you have to be able
mhm.
to have steady, reliable, fast access to the internet. And so I think it's interesting. You're starting to see some cities really invest in their internet infrastructure with the hope of luring more talent into their markets. And, I was reading an article earlier this summer about a small town in Italy. The name of it is escaping me right now,
Mm.
but it was small town after in like a lot of cities in Italy, they had some real challenges where all of the young people were moving out of that village and going into the cities. And so you had this village that was aging. The population was very old, beautiful village, picturesque in the mountains, but there was no young
Yeah.
people. And so they brought in their mayor, basically said, we need to make investments on internet bandwidth, and we need to make sure that we have exceptional internet speed. And if we do that, we can draw young people back into the city. And they did, and it had a very positive impact on reverse migration. So people that were leaving the city were not coming back, but also people, especially digital nomads and people who in this new world of work could do their job from anywhere. They were also being attracted to relocate there because it had the reliable infrastructure and bandwidth. But that is key, and I think that is something that the West will have to be actively involved in, kind of helping in areas where maybe it's not as strong to level the
Hmm.
playing field. Because that in this new internet era, that
Yeah.
is really the access ramp, right, to be able to contribute on a global basis.
All right. One major issue I mean, reading uh, essays, papers this period that I have come to notice with the style of work that is taking shape and all that is mental health. A lot of we have a lot of mental health issues, popping up here and there. How do you think HR can address this, from a policy standpoint in helping employees, workers, and all that?
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing we have to do is take it out of the shadows, take those conversations out of the shadows. And that's something that is happening now. I think, obviously, a global pandemic has had an adverse impact on everybody on some level or another, and everybody's mental health on some level or another. And so I think you're starting to see more HR departments look at mental health support and benefits as a staple of health benefits that are offered to employees. So there's new vendors like Spring Health and Modern Health that you see a lot of in the kind of Bay Area technology companies that are that have counselors and different support set up, offering things like mental health days, where depending on your vacation programs and policies, sometimes it's hard to get a day off, and sometimes you need a mental health day where you're just the stress of whatever it is you're dealing with, the emotional strain of whatever you're dealing with is too much to be able to focus on a role. And so you just need a day to just not think about work or kind of remove yourself from that environment that's causing that stress. And so I think that is something that is firmly a part of the HR conversation in modern organizations now, and will only continue to be. And I think from a practitioner standpoint, and I would broaden this to just say business leaders in general, not just HR leaders, role modeling that behavior as well is really important, because it's one thing to talk about valuing mental health, and it's one thing to talk about saying that this is this is really important and we want to take care of you. But if no employees see their leaders taking advantage of that, it might not feel real to them. They might say, of course you're saying this, but like, am I going to be punished if I take a mental health day? Are you going to think about differently about my commitment? And so I think it's also really important for leaders to role model that behavior as leaders, so that their employees know that it's okay for them to take a mental health day. It's okay for them to reach out for support if they need it. So I think that element is really important.
Now, when you mentioned taking the conversation out of the shadows, what came to my mind, was this some parts of cultural, what I say, belief system. We don't talk about things like this in public and all that. When you do, there's this stigma that comes upon you and all. But I was listening to Princess Diana's interview some I think that was in December before Christmas, before the
Mm-hmm.
holidays, and when she gave that interview that broke the camel's back, so to say, and people started talking about mental health, like embracing it and talking about it. So I think it's really key we take that, like you said, the conversation out of the shadows, talk about it. These are real issues affecting people. But now to this question, the Great Resignation. I know you were in the U.S. It's been. I saw something on. I think that was on Wall Street Journal or so, and other write-ups. How do we tackle this issue of the Great Resignation? Because it's just hitting us everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's interesting. I think there's a lot of euphemisms for what's happening: the Great Resignation, the Great Realignment, the Great Reprioritization, the Great
Yeah,
Rebalancing. Right? I mean, it's like there's lots of brands around what's happening,
exactly.
and it's a lot of things, right? I think we have to first recognize that, like, employees and not just employees, humans have been
Mhm.
through a lot over the last 2 years. And it's caused a lot of them to rethink their priorities, to rethink what's
Yeah,
important to them. And if you're in a role that's not, meeting what your criteria are now, especially in a job market like this that is booming, you're not going to stay in it, and you don't have to stay in it. And so, there's a lot of privilege in that statement. Of course, not everybody is in a position where they can leave a job. So
mhm.
absolutely, let's recognize that. But I think for these kind of, again, people in these knowledge worker roles, in these in-demand positions, they have the ability to do that work in many different companies in many different regions. And so part of this is, companies maybe undervaluing or underpaying or whatever it might be their employees, and that's causing them to leave. Some of it may be employees just want to do something different. They just had
Yeah,
this kind of life-changing event, and their priorities have changed. So I think that there is, there are companies that are experiencing this turnover. Obviously, that's hard to do, and it's hard to go through, and it impacts the business pretty substantially.
yeah.
Um, but I think that even companies with fantastic cultures and
Hmm.
fantastic managers and fantastic compensation programs, they're feeling this too. right? This isn't just companies that are maybe on that you wouldn't. These are companies that you would expect are talent magnets and
Yeah.
really be holding talent. So I think this is just this kind of rebalancing that we're going through, and companies that are for example, companies that are being very rigid about return to workplace, and they're trying to force their employees back into an office 5 days a week after they've proven for 2 years they don't need to do that. They can, those companies are going to struggle because, again, some employees desperately want to go back to office, but many more don't, or certainly not 5 days a week. And so companies that are really rigid about that, I think they're going to be, bearing the brunt of the Great Resignation the most.
Whoa. Guys, we've been discussing with Lars Schmidt, for the past 20 minutes, the voice and face behind Amplify and redefining HR. We've been talking about the changes upon, HR practice, work, and all that. And Lars has been giving us, I would say, awesome information. Awesome information. Lars, before I let you go, because I know you're a very busy man, what's your plan for 2022? What are you up to? What are you up to?
Yeah, I'm up to, I'm still continuing to build and scale the accelerator platform in Amplify. So that is a new platform again aimed at kind of developing and connecting and supporting global HR leaders. And so there's a cohort program in there. There's a community. There's a job board. There's an open source lab. Lots of different facets to it. But I'm excited to continue growing that and really doing what I can to kind of shine a light on innovative practices and progressive practices that are happening in HR, and kind of leaders who are really, again, seizing this moment that we have to redefine work itself. So it's an exciting time, and I feel very fortunate to be able to be on the front lines of this, both participating in it, but also documenting it from an editorial standpoint.
Wonderful. Yeah, so, what was that last word you have for my audience with respect to the, would I say, future of work based on HR practices?
Yeah, the future of work is exciting. The future of work is dynamic, and that's probably the dynamic is probably the word I'm going to use there. If you give me one word, primarily because I think the world of work had been pretty static for
Mm-hmm.
quite some time. The
Yeah,
way that we did things 2 years ago wasn't that different than the way we did things 30 years ago.
true.
That's changing rapidly now, and so this new period is very dynamic, and I'm excited for it. I think a lot of good is going to come from it.
Awesome. Yes, guys, a lot of good will come from it. We are in that era of dynamism. Things are just like unfolding, what I say, faster than the speed of light now. Yes, we have been discussing with Lars Schmidt. He has given so much, so much. Before we connect with you, how can the audience connect with you now?
Yeah, so my website is amplifytalent.com, and that has all the information about my podcast, book, accelerator platform, and everything else. And you can also find me on Twitter at Lars, and of course LinkedIn.
Yeah, that's the place to always catch him. The best place for me to see his work is on LinkedIn. Yes. Thank you so much, guys. Oh, it's been a wonderful, wonderful time. But time is not always our friend when it comes to things like this. But I know when we call on Lars again to like have this discussion, should I say on redefining HR 2.0 or 3.0 or 4.0, he would respond. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being there. You know how we do it on the show. We always come in to lean on one another to experience ourselves and find ourselves and walk out of those dark situations. Till I come your way again, I am your host, Amakri Isoe. Bye for now.
Take care, Makri. Thanks for having me on.